Picture opening your closet a year from now. The door swings back and the air inside is just clean. Your good wool coat comes off the rail smelling like wool, not like mothballs, with no damp mustiness under it and no little hole in the sleeve you do not remember from last winter. The clothes come out exactly the way you put them in, and nothing on the wall made that happen. No dehumidifier hummed through the night on your power bill. The silica packets people rebuy were not tucked in the drawers, and the cedar block that fades after a season was not doing the work either. In an old Japanese house, a closet that clean was ordinary, and it did not come from a shelf of products bought one at a time. It came from one object, a chest of drawers made of a pale feather-light wood. On a wet day, it draws the damp out of the air around your clothes, and on a dry day, it hands that moisture back. It keeps the moths out of the wool on its own without a single mothball in a drawer. But there was a second thing this chest did, one that old families trusted it with above almost everything else in the house, and it has nothing to do with damp at all. In my grandmother's back room, one of these stood breathing in the corner. "Let the box breathe," she used to say, like it was the most obvious instruction in the world. I had no idea what she meant. By the end of this, you will also know the one thing about these chests that almost everyone gets exactly backwards today. So let me start with what that clean closet actually costs you now, because most of us pay for it in small pieces and never add the pieces up. A little plug-in dehumidifier for a closet runs about $20 to $40, and then it draws power every night it runs. A bag of silica packets is a few dollars, and the whole point of them is that they fill up so you toss them and buy more. A box of mothballs is a few dollars again, and you rebuy those too, and the smell rides your sweaters for weeks. A set of cedar blocks might be $10 or $15, and everyone forgets the catch, which is that cedar quits working the moment the scent fades, so you sand it back to raw every few months or replace it. None of that is expensive on any given Saturday. That is exactly why it works on you. It is a slow, steady leak spread across 4 different shelves, so you never feel its real size. And here is the quiet insult at the center of it. None of it is dryness you own. It is dryness you rent. Every one of those products gets used up, runs down, or plugs in, and not a single one is ever the last one you buy. Year after year, that closet is a small open tab you keep paying and never close. Now hold that against the old answer. A small chest or storage case of solid-kiri wood, the wood this whole video is about, runs somewhere around $60 to $200, and the idea of it is that you buy it one time. Not once a season, once. A well-made one outlives the person who buys it, and you will soon see why that is a plain description of the wood, not a sales line. The full traditional version costs more, and I will be honest later about exactly how much, because that is the real catch and I'm not going to bury it. But the principle is already the whole point. One object bought one time, doing the job of a shelf full of things you currently rebuy on a schedule you never chose. Let me take you to where this chest actually lived, because that is where it starts to make sense. Picture a wooden house in Japan in high summer in the stretch we call tsuyu, the rainy season, when the air turns to a warm, wet cloth that sits on everything for weeks. In that climate, damp is the thing that ruins silk. It breeds mold in the folds of a good kimono. It dulls the dyes. It draws the moths in. And a fine kimono was often the single most valuable thing a family owned, worth more than most of the furniture around it. So every household faced the same plain, serious question. Where do you put the one beautiful, fragile, expensive thing you own so that the summer does not quietly eat it? The answer stood in the back room against the wall in the coolest and dimmest corner of the house, a paulownia chest. In my grandmother's house, it was pale and plain and far lighter than it looked, and I could slide a full drawer open with one finger. Inside, wrapped in soft paper, the good cloth waited out the wet months and came back in autumn exactly as it went in. Nobody in that house ever called it clever. It was just where the kimono lived. That is the half of this I grew up with, without once knowing it was worth knowing. The skeptic in me went looking, years later, for whether the chest was really doing something or whether I was just fond of an old piece of furniture. The records turned out to be plainer than I expected, and they have a hometown. It is Kamo, a small city in Niigata on the wet western side of the country, and to this day around 70% of all the paulownia chests made in Japan still come from that one town. The trade traces back to a joiner named Kuamon Maruya in the 1780s, whose early chest is remembered as the seed of the whole Kamo tradition. And the oldest surviving paulownia chest from there carries a note brushed on the back. It reads, "Purchased in 1814. You can go and look that record up. It is a real object with a real date on it, made when Napoleon was still alive and the United States was not yet 40 years old." By around 1820, these chests were being loaded onto boats and floated down the Kamo and Shinano rivers to sell all across the north. And in 1877, a local record of the town counted the year's output. Around 600 chests, all told, out of one small place, already shipping up into Hokkaido and across the whole Tohoku region. That is industry scale, and it grew for one plain reason. The chest worked in a country whose climate gave families little choice but to solve the damp. And here is the part that still stops me. Those chests did not wear out. In the towns that made them, families are still using paulownia chests that are 200 years old, sliding open the same drawers their great-great-grandparents did, keeping this winter's coats where somebody once kept a wedding kimono. When one gets scratched, or grimy or dark with age, even a chest a century and a half old, a craftsman can plane the soft surface back and it comes up looking new again, ready for another generation to fill it. You will not be doing that with a plastic tub. That is the track record, and it is worth sitting with. A named town, a dated object, an industry that ran for 2 full centuries, and furniture still doing its job long after the people who bought it are 4 and 5 generations gone. So the real question stopped being whether the chest works. It became the far more interesting one. Why does it work? What is a soft, pale, feather-light wood actually doing in there that a sealed plastic bin and a bag of packets simply cannot? That is where a fond old story turns into something you can use, and it is exactly where we are headed next. Let me open the wood up and show you what is really going on. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Start with the weight, because it is the whole secret. Paulownia kiri is the lightest wood grown in Japan. A cubic foot of it weighs around 16 pounds, where the same block of oak runs closer to 45. It is roughly a third the weight of a normal hardwood, and the reason is that the wood is mostly AIR. Under a microscope, it looks like a honeycomb. Millions of tiny hollow cells. That honeycomb is the machine. All that empty space makes the wood act like a sponge for water vapor, and it works in both directions. When the air around it turns damp, the wood quietly drinks the moisture out of it. When the air dries out, the wood gives that moisture back. It keeps chasing the middle. So inside a closed kiri chest, the humidity stays far steadier than the air in the room, holding a moderate level even through the wettest weeks of the year, while the room outside swings all over the place. Your silica packets try to do this and fill up and quit. The wood just keeps breathing. Then there is the part that feels like a trick the first time you understand it. As the wood takes on moisture, it swells, just slightly, and the drawers of a real kiri chest are built oversized on purpose, then planned down by hand to a hair of clearance, so that on the dampest, most dangerous days of the year, the wood swells and the drawers press tight against the frame and seal the whole box shut. When the air dries, the wood shrinks back and the drawers slide easy again, Sit with what that means. The chest tightens itself exactly when the threat is highest and loosens when the danger passes. Nobody flips a switch. The weather does it, and it handles the moths on its own because the wood carries its own oils and tannins, compounds with names like paulownia and sesamin that clothes-eating insects tend to avoid. It is not a poison, and I will not pretend it fumigates anything. It simply is not a wood that pests want to live in. So there is the dehumidifier, the silica, the mothballs, and the cedar, all four folded into one quiet box that runs on nothing. Now, remember the second thing I promised you back at the start. The reason families guarded this one chest above almost everything else in the house. Here it is. Quick thing before I get to it. If a single object that empties a whole shelf of products is the kind of knowledge you would rather have than keep buying, that is most of what this channel is. Subscribe and the next one comes to you. Now the second thing, that same wood is one of the most fire-resistant materials you could build furniture from. It is porous and full of air, and it does not catch until it is far hotter than ordinary wood, close to twice the temperature. Even then, the surface chars into a black crust instead of feeding the flames, and that crust, plus the wood's very low ability to carry heat, holds the burn on the outside. There are old accounts of a well-made paulownia chest coming through a house fire with the folded clothing inside barely touched. And there is an old account from Camo of a chest swept away in a flood, then dried out and opened, and the clothes inside were still clean and dry while the whole outside was caked in river mud because the swollen wood had sealed the seams tight. That is the same swelling that keeps your sweaters dry in July, doing double duty against a fire and a flood. One behavior in the wood, quietly saving everything you own. This is fire resistant, not fireproof, and I will be honest about the limits in a minute. But as the place to keep the one irreplaceable thing you own when the worst comes, it earned its reputation. So how do you actually use one? It is simple, and a few small habits make it work. Only ever put things away clean and bone dry, because the chest balances humidity, but it cannot fix a damp shirt you sealed inside it. Wrap your delicate pieces in plain paper before you lay them in. Do not cram it full, because the wood needs a little air to do its work. Stand it a few inches off the wall so air can move around the back. And a couple of times a year, on a clear, dry day, open every drawer and let the whole thing air out, and take the good garments out to breathe. That is the entire routine. And here is the one thing almost everyone gets backwards now, the thing my grandmother was actually telling me. Let the box breathe. A kiri chest works only because the bare wood is open to the air, so the worst thing you can do to one is seal it. Do not varnish it, lacquer it, or put a hard glossy finish on it, because the moment you cap those pores, the wood can no longer soak up or swell, and you have turned a living humidity buffer into a plain, pale box. The traditional finish is barely a finish at all, just a light rub that leaves the grain open on purpose. And do not line it with plastic or store your clothes inside it in sealed vacuum bags, because that traps the damp against the cloth and undoes everything the wood is trying to do. That same rule is how you avoid wasting your money. A lot of what gets sold as a paulownia chest is a thin kiri veneer glued over particle board and sealed under a shiny coat. It looks the part and does none of the work, because a skin of wood over a dead core cannot breathe or swell. The tells are easy. Real solid-kiri is shockingly light for its size, pale, with visible end grain, and the drawers fit so closely they shift a little with the seasons, snug in the wet months and looser in the dry. A veneered box is heavy, hard-finished, and its drawers fit exactly the same in July as in January, because nothing in it is alive to the air. So pick it up before you buy. If it is light as a picnic basket and the drawers seal like they mean it, you are holding the real thing. Now I owe you the honest limits, because that is the whole point of this channel. and it is where trust is either earned or lost. First, a kiri chest protects what is inside the chest. It is not a room dehumidifier. It will not dry out your basement or fix the air in a whole walk-in closet. It balances the small sealed world of its own drawers, so it replaces those 4 products for the clothes and papers you actually keep in it, and not for the space around it. Second, it is a buffer with ceilings. In a sealed, tropical, streaming wet room, you can still get mold, which is why you air it out and store things dry. It deters insects rather than fumigating them, and the fire resistance, real as it is resistance and not a promise. And then there is the catch I said I would not bury. A genuine kiri chest is an investment. A small solid box or a single drawer case runs somewhere between $60 and $200, and that is the honest, doable entry point for your most valuable clothes. But a full handmade chest from one of those Kamo or Nagoya workshops runs from several $100s up into the low thousands, and a good antique can sit anywhere from around $1,000 to $3,000 or more. This is the opposite kind of frugal from a bucket of water. You spend real money one time on a thing that outlives you, instead of a little money forever on things that do not. Which is exactly why it lost, and here is the honest version of why. Because it was no conspiracy and nobody buried it. There is simply no business in a box that lasts 100 years and asks for nothing. The money is all in the other column, in the dehumidifier drawing power on your bill every night, in the packets and the mothballs you rebuy, in the cedar you replace. A company can build a steady business on things that run down and get restocked. It cannot build one on a chest you buy once from a craftsman and hand to your grandchildren. So the disposable defenses got the shelf space and the advertising, and the chest quietly slid to the back of the store and then out of it. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. Every silica packet you throw away, every mothball that shrinks to nothing, every tank of water you tip out of the dehumidifier is you paying again to pull out moisture that the right box would simply hold in balance and hand back. You have been renting a fix on a subscription you never signed for a problem a piece of wood solves by breathing. So let me leave you with the part of this I think about the most. There was an old custom in Japan of planting a paulownia tree when a daughter was born. The tree grows fast enough that by the time that girl was grown and ready to marry, it was big enough to cut, and her parents would have it milled into her wedding chest. Sit with that for a second. The furniture was the same age as the marriage, grown alongside the child, handed over on the day she left home. That is what this object really is, an inheritance you can hold in your 2 hands. So tell me 2 things down in the comments. How do you fight closet damp right now? A plug-in dehumidifier, the little packets, cedar blocks, or nothing at all? And is there a piece of furniture in your family that got handed down and still does its job? I read those. This whole channel exists to keep these plain old methods from quietly slipping away. So if that matters to you, subscribe and help keep the thread from breaking. Next time, the few dollar version of this same idea, a stick of Japanese charcoal called binchotan that pulls the damp and the smell out of a drawer or a whole room for about the price of a coffee. Same family of knowledge, same buy it and forget it logic. Until then, buy it once, let the box breathe and hand it to someone you love.